go to school, and a lot of them just take on debt, like considerable amounts of debt, and most people have been trained to think that that's normal. So I'm not sure if it's prevented them from going to school, but I know that it's hurt them down the line because they have really horrific debt. So I don't know if it's stopped them from getting in the doors, but I know it's stopped them from having the careers they want.
And those who've spent some time in Europe or looked at economics know that most of Europe, college is free today. This is yet one of the things where the United States is far behind. Now, de Blasio's putting $70 million on the table, although he hasn't figured out where the money is going to come from, and he says it's going to take 10 years to bring Wi-Fi to almost everybody. Stu, does that make sense? Will it get a lot more people connected?
Well, I mean, who knows? I did read that he said he's going to spend most of that money in the early part of the 10 years rather than the latter. It certainly is baffling why it's going to take that long or even half that long to do that. Back in the 80s when they started to bring cable to the outer boroughs of New York, Brooklyn, Bronx, Queens, Staten Island, folks were outraged, including myself, that folks like Cablevision said it was going to take 10 years to wire those boroughs. Now that was running fiber optic and coax cable underground along telephone poles throughout the whole community. Why it would take 10 years to put up hotspots in underserved communities is beyond me. I mean, that's the kind of thing that could be done in 1 or 2 years if you had the will and $70 million.
How long did it take you to hook up a building when you were doing that kind of work? Months, weeks, years?
You talking about the wireless? Because we've done both. We used to be cable guys, we used to be fiber optic guys, and we have transitioned to wireless because, one, speed is incredibly different. It might take several weeks to run a fiber optic connection just across the street from building to building. Today, you can put up the same link in a day or less than a day.
It didn't take years, though, did it?
No, it did not take years. It did not take years. Back then, the rationale was that, all those poor black and brown people in those underserved communities don't have the money to buy our services. Therefore, we have to start slowly, build up our cash flow, and then we'll be able to service these poor areas and build the network out. Never mind the fact that poor folks are voracious consumers of technology, television, internet, and telephone. I mean, more so than your average consumer.
I've heard that from folks like Comcast, saying they don't want to be racist because poor people and black people actually sign on pretty well. You were working in some of the South Bronx projects. Did a lot of people there get connected?
Well, I don't know if you're
including
talking about
with TV.
To our service, yes. To our service, I think back, I'm talking about now in the early 2000s, we had a triple play service in the South Bronx prior to Cablevision, prior to Verizon even thinking about going into the television business. And folks snatched it up. We had some compelling offerings. We did things like we actually sold the set-top box, and you only needed one in your house for multiple TVs, as opposed to the current model then and today, where they rent the cable box for $10 or so per month, every month, month in, month out, and you need one for every TV. Even if it's a reduced, dumbed-down model like the new Verizon, they have a primary server that they put in the house, and then they put clients at the other TVs. The clients are much smaller, dumb boxes. Well, you still pay that same $10 a month monthly fee to rent that device. So
tell us some more about Verizon, since you just switched from Cablevision to Verizon.
Well, yeah, I did. It's interesting. They just made a big announcement, Verizon, that they were starting to unbundle the cable channels. This is something that consumers and consumer advocates have been crying for decades. Because basically you have to buy 100 channels or so in the basic package, probably 3/4 of which you don't even watch.
You mean some people don't watch football?
Some people don't. Some people don't watch Bravo. Some people don't watch the Food Network. In my house, I watch about maybe a dozen channels. My wife watches a different dozen. But it's interesting the way Verizon is unbundling, and I put that in quotation marks. They are still not doing what we would like, which is a la carte. That is, pick the channels that you want and only pay for those channels. That's what we'd like to get to, but they're not there. What they have done is they have identified about 5 or 6 buckets of channels.
So it's just new bundles.
It's just new bundles. Thank you, Lena. And when you look at them, oh, I want something out of this bundle and something out of that bundle. So you end up, you got to buy every bundle to get your 5 or 6 channels again. So you're back to paying the same amount of money.
Lena, is that what you're finding with your connections?
When I moved to New York in 2004, I never got cable, and I've only had it for maybe 2 months in the entire time I've lived here.
And we're going to get to the alternatives to cable.
Mm-hmm.
Jenny and I also cut the cord, and there's lots of possibilities there. Craig Moffett, one of the top Wall Street analysts, went through the numbers, and he figured out on a $150 cable bill, you could, with Verizon's new plan, save $6 a month.
Wow.
If you were willing to give up hundreds of channels, many of which you weren't going to be interested in. You don't need Spanish channels when you don't happen to speak the language.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And I think football is so violent, even though I used to play it, I can't watch it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want the football.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no choice in that except shutting it down.
The only times I've seen people get very excited who have cut the cord and are trying to figure out how to change it, how to get what they're wanting, is certain show premieres and specifically during the World Cup. But the answer to that was going to the bars that had the World Cup playing.
Mm-hmm.
Or the other answer, and it belongs in the discussion, is going to the torrents on the internet, where in fact you can find the World Cup, the NBA, Downton Abbey from England 4 months before it comes to the United States.
Folks told me they watched the fight this past weekend on the internet. They had to go from one hookup, one location, site location to another because they were systematically being shut down, but they saw the fight online for free.
I heard also that it popped up on Periscope, which is the the streaming service related to Twitter.
Yes.
Right?
Video over Twitter, live.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
This has been a war I've been watching long time. Once we got internet connections fast enough to watch TV. First we had the problem with music, then when it was fast enough we had the problem with TV. And they're at war on this all around the world. I can bring you some stories from Australia. There is something that, by and large, they can't do, which is to prevent you pointing your camera at your TV screen and picking up whatever program you happen to have there and sending it to your friends over the internet. That's really easy with the new services like Periscope. So suddenly, they got scared. I mean, they only made $300 million this time on that boxing match. And that's not enough.
But isn't there some legislation? Weren't there some lawsuits initiated as a result of that, Dave? I mean, is everything settled yet that you can do that without liability? Where's that going to go?
Well, they just can't stop you.
Okay.
Well, they can stop you if is Twitter who owns the service. And, in fact, the fight guys were sitting there finding all the Periscope feeds, telling Twitter, shut this one down, shut that one down, which is why you had to go from one to the other.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But there was no way, because thousands of people were doing it.
I think once you let the genie out of the bottle, it's out. I don't see how they're going to regulate that. Even if they pass legislation, I don't see how they enforce it.
Simple. You send a few thousand people to jail.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, in the studio across from here, WBAI is now. Many years ago, I did a computer show on BAI. And we had somebody, I think it was one of the other hosts on the show, say, there's no way they can stop us from pirating what we want to. And I said, yes, they can. They just put a pile of people in jail. And that's probably going to stop you. Unfortunately or unfortunately, they've only put a handful of people in jail so far. But every time this goes, and there's another one in Washington right now, that wants to raise copying a program for no money, non-commercial, from a misdemeanor to a 5-year prison sentence as a felony.
Wow.
And that's where power and money of the of RIAA get you.
I don't, I don't know. We got a strange Supreme Court now, so who knows what would happen. But I've been around long enough to remember the Sony Betamax litigation, and back then, back in the '70s, in the old days, they tried to say that it was illegal, that VCRs were illegal and had to be stopped because you could record copyrighted material without paying the copyright owner. Went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the VCR guys won. Betamax won. So
By one vote.
Okay, well,
Four Supreme Court judges said, no, it's illegal to VCR a program. So that was a pretty close one.
Yes, it was. And we got a different Supreme Court today, so who knows where it may land.
Fortunately, the guys who want to take that to court are too scared that they're going to lose, and they don't want to establish the loss.
What has happened, Dave? Bring us up to speed and our audience with the whole music, quote-unquote, theft with the Napster and all that stuff. I remember for a while the record industry was making big noise about going after individuals and locking them up, as you say, for pirating music. Where's the industry on that now?
They've just personally bankrupted the owner of one of the services.
Mm-hmm.
There's another woman who is facing a $180,000 judgment against her. But by and large, they decided it was too much trouble to go to court.
Mm-hmm.
So they're usually not doing that. They want the government to go to court for them. And they want Google to come in. And they want, this is one that I've been watching, the Australian government to make it illegal to watch American television.
Wow.
Because they want to sell the television and the DVDs in Australia 4 months later. And that's a fight that currently is in the in fact, it came up 2 days ago. The Internet Society in Australia complained that no, Australia should not be blocking you from seeing it because otherwise everybody's going to pirate. But that's what the RAA is screaming. Now, interesting. How much can you download? One of the pictures that our technical difficulties have made it impractical is 2 months ago, Netflix got to Australia. It is already 25% of the internet traffic.
And 25%? You mean Netflix? And
Netflix,
and
period.
Aggregate?
Netflix.
Wow.
Not aggregate. Netflix. Because they only got Netflix 2 months ago, and they were so anxious, and they'd been waiting so long.
Wait, hold on, Dave. You're saying Australia, Netflix is 25% of the internet?
In Australia.
Wow.
I have a Australian roommate who, when he showed up, was like, oh, this is much more convenient, because he'd been using proxy addresses to have Netflix in Australia, and he'd set it up for his family there, and he'd signed up with an American address. The address he had used was the one for the house in Home Alone with Macaulay Culkin. And it was very interesting to hear about the differences, because they do say that there are different markets for Netflix as well, or at least they're looking into it.
No, they're definitely doing different markets. You cannot on Netflix England watch much of what's on Netflix US, and the other way around.
Those are copyright issues, is that?
Those are business model issues of how the TV studios or the movie studios choose to sell things.
Mm-hmm.
That's coming up on the Verizon one.
Mm-hmm.
ESPN, I think, is the one who took them to court already on that, saying no. If you want to show ESPN, the contract you signed with us required that you require 90% of your viewers to pay for ESPN, which is the most expensive channel on cable. It's about $50 a year. And since only something like a quarter of people actually watch it, that means for everybody who watches it, it's $200 a year.
Sure.
The Yankees got very rich that way.
Yeah, that's back to the whole bundling thing. I used to be in the cable TV business back in the old days, again, back in the 80s and 90s. And as an operator, we were required to pay for each and every basic channel. And we had to, of course, had to pass those costs on to the consumer. So ESPN back then was probably about $1.50. But still, that was expensive. MSG was around $1. BET, interesting enough, was 10 cents.
And they were lucky to get it.
Well, that's what the white guy said. You're lucky to get it, boy. Just keep moving. But in any event, the consumer had to pay for all of those channels, whether they liked them or not. And ever since probably the beginning of cable back in the 60s, that has been the model. It has worked well for the operator because they are able to pass all those costs on to the consumer. It's worked great for the programmers because they are guaranteed carriage by every customer. You can't even buy a premium channel without first buying the full basic.
And that is breaking apart.
Yes.
For example, HBO will now sell it to you even if you don't have a cable license.
That's brand new.
That's brand new.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
It's because of the piracy. The extent to which all of HBO's shows were just being pirated
Dave,
like mad.
that's over the internet, isn't? That's not on a cable system. You can't
Right.
do that. That's over the internet.
right, and it's
Yeah.
only over some
Yeah.
internet networks.
Well, let's talk some more about this over-the-top thing, as it's called in the industry. The term over-the-top basically means that you can go get programming that's not in the cable TV bundle.
Horrors! Disaster! Brian Roberts won't make $30 million next year at Comcast.
But guess what? Yes, he will. Yes, he will. Believe me, the big guys are going to figure out they're burning the midnight oil right now to make sure that they are still guaranteed their cash flow. Cablevision just announced last week a special cord cutters service. This is a cable company selling a service for you folks that want to cut the cord to cable. Because guess what? In order to cut the cord, what do you need? Internet.
And how much are they charging for it?
$50.
Verizon is even worse. Simple internet connections from Verizon in 2007 cost between $15 and $30. The cheapest service you can buy from Verizon today is $70.
Wow.
So if we think it's important to get everybody on the internet, the first thing you do is you take Verizon and you twist their arm behind their back or put a gun to their head and say whatever else you do, you've got to have something decent for poor people. And in fact, Comcast is doing just that. They have a $10 a month offer for anybody with a kid in school.
Where's the free stuff, Dave? I'm poor. I don't have $10.
So that's why
Where's
we're
the free
talking
stuff?
about New York City
Where's the free
bringing
stuff?
it in, finally.
Finally.
Yeah,
well,
I'm-
maybe fine. It's
See,
a big maybe.
I always wonder about the Wi-Fi setup because, is it going to be strong enough? Looking in to the phone booth Wi-Fis, it doesn't look like it's really going to be able to handle that much. Like, if people are trying to cut the cord and use a free phone box-based Wi-Fi, they're not going to have enough bandwidth.
It's not enough for a lot of people to watch video.
And even this new initiative that the city is doing, I guarantee you they're going to protect the incumbents. And they're not going to allow anything out there that's free that is a high enough speed to compete with the paid internet service. I guarantee you. They're just not going to do it. It's not in their interest, the city's interest. They get too much in terms of franchise fees from Verizon, from Cablevision, and Time Warner for them to, not do that.
Well, it may be a little bit more subtle than that. It looks, for example, that the Wi-Fi from that phone booth is going to be plenty fast enough even for 3 people to watch HD
Yeah, but you got to
TV.
go out to the corner to watch TV. Come on.
No, you can be upstairs from that phone booth on the 3rd floor. It's going to work fine.
I'm not convinced. Also, if it does reach all of those apartments, you're going to have more than 3 people on
Right.
it.
And that's the
Right.
kind of thing they do. It's in the fine print. Now, one of the ugliest things I've ever seen is what Facebook is doing around the world, where they are trying to take over the internet. The ones I know are Kenya, India, Indonesia, and the Philippines. But they're talking to Brazil and Colombia.
And what are they doing, Dave?
They are getting the local phone companies and ISPs to subsidize Facebook. They're not putting a penny up. And then people who connect through Facebook will be able to get it without paying their ISPs. Now, why would the ISPs do this? And I'm actually breaking the story in the English language press. Because Facebook has 1 billion subscribers. An awful lot of them are India, possibly on dial-up. And if you are Reliance, the outfit that is working with Facebook in India, if you didn't sign up, Facebook was going to go to your competitor Bharti and say, you 30 million Facebook people, you sign up with Bharti, not Reliance.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a fellow in The Godfather who used to make offers like that. And in fact, I found out about this because one of the Indonesians said, no, that's ridiculous. And I'm sitting there saying, this is Robin Hood in reverse.
So break this down for us, David. Facebook is becoming the ISP, or
No, Facebook is cutting a deal that they call zero rating. In other words, if you connect to Facebook, and currently your choice of about 20 other sites, you're not charged for the connection.
Wow, this sounds
but
like
that's not being paid for by Facebook.
You know what this sounds like, though, Dave? This sounds like the old AOL walled garden of 15 years ago when AOL first launched. You went on AOL, and the only place you could go was to their sites. They called it a walled garden.
It's even worse than that, though, because at least AOL was America Online.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about Facebook trying to take over Kenya and India and Brazil and the U.S.
Infidels online, huh?
Well, there's certainly a lot of people who think consulting Muhammad should not be allowed. I don't know if we want to get into that debate on community and technology. It turned out to be a real tough debate, and it's actually worth thinking about. What do you guys think about the Charlie Hebdo and the people who were shot down in Texas this week? How should we respond to they must have freedom of speech to do whatever they want?
My feeling, it's wrong to shoot people for any reason. I don't care what it is. I mean, that's not what we're supposed to be doing. But I think these folks are provoking. That's a very provocative thing that they're doing. And I think there's a political agenda, and I don't think it's pure. I don't think it's genuine. I don't think it's really about free speech. I think it's about, let me see if I can rackle the nerves of this group.
Well, there are other countries have the notion of hate speech in a more defined way than America's really comfortable getting into legislatively. And I think the idea of hate speech as a thing is something that America needs to figure out, to grapple with.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I remember in my days on BAI, Kofi Pendergrast was engineering a show I was doing that related to some community stuff. And Kofi said, the most important thing we have to do is make racism illegal, make it a crime. Whether that be hate speech or however else you defend it, he thinks it should be a crime. Now, I disagree. So did my grandfather, the Orthodox rabbi. My granddaddy, Orthodox rabbi, had a copy of Hitler's Mein Kampf on his bookshelf. And I was about 8 years old, and I asked him, how can you have that? And he said, we have to understand. But there's a whole lot of people who think that Mein Kampf should not be allowed out to anyone anywhere, including the governments of Germany and France for the last 50 years, where it's illegal to sell Nazi memorabilia in France, and Yahoo wound up in court over that.
But there's a big difference, Dave, between what you read at home, what you share with your family, and what you go on the soapbox, whether it be broadcast, whether it be a convention or whatever, and start to propagate. Back to Lena's point of hate speech. That's about public airways, public speaking, as opposed to private speaking. I think there's a big difference.
And unless you guys feel strongly, let's get back to the technology side.
So
Lena
the way
wants
I
to
would
come
get
in.
back to the technology side is saying how these conversations play out online is very interesting, because there's a lot of corners of the internet which exist in that gray space between public and private speech. Because if you think of the internet as simply as a broadcast medium, you've kind of lost the finesse, the fact that there are people who communicate online and don't think of it as a soapbox, but you can still have that same thing happen. It's one of the difficulties of what is speech online.
Mm-hmm.
And in England, some of the things that I've written online would probably be illegal libel. And that certainly would be true in Singapore.
Well,
Because they have a different attitude on what's right or wrong, and the politicians make the libel laws, and they don't like being attacked. So that where in the United States, and I've had to say it twice to people who were threatening me, truth is a defense for libel. It isn't necessarily a defense in the United Kingdom. That if you're offensive to the King of Thailand, for example, where people are in jail right now for insulting him, they think that's a crime and they'll put you in jail.
True or not, regardless of the veracity of the statement, they're talking about the impact of your statement.
And obviously the Chinese, they don't put you in jail directly for that, but we have the important example of they usually shut down YouTube, Twitter, Google, and a lot of others because they think they're insulting China and not obeying the Chinese law for the harmonious society. And the New York Times has been shut down in China for about the last year and a half because they did a remarkable set of articles showing that the son of the ex-premier and his family had picked up some stock, I think, in insurance companies and housing that was worth over $500 million.
Wow.
And the Chinese government said, okay, we're going to shut down the New York Times, which had been intending to have a major business in China. Now, Google walked out when they had that choice. Facebook and Yahoo have been begging the Chinese to work with them, as has Microsoft, and doing whatever is necessary to keep the Chinese happy. What's right or wrong? I don't know any more than you do.
Well,
but I can tell you what's happening there because I can watch this stuff.
Well, Dave, to me, the exciting thing about the technology today is its fast evolution and decentralization to the point where regular, everyday people now have the power to make their voice heard globally using the internet. So regardless of what all of these countries legislate, and what all of these multi-billion-dollar corporations, how they dance with the various regulations of the countries, the people on the ground, as this technology evolves further and further, I think are going to have more tools, more ways to have their voices heard. And at the end of the day, I don't think there's going to be any way to shut that down. To me, that's exciting.
Well, Cisco built a pretty good firewall for China. Most Americans don't realize Cisco built a lot of it. But last thing before we go to a break, examples of what you're saying. Netflix was not available in Australia. You had to go through setting up things like VPNs and special accounts in order to connect. I happened to have dinner with the guy, and I can't be more explicit to say that he's one of the top dozen people at their phone company, which is the largest internet provider in Australia. And he was watching Netflix from the United States via a VPN. Let's play a couple of cards.
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
Where is Public Enemy?
What's the deal? What's your latest hit, brother?
Fear of a black planet. People fear something that they know nothing about.
Man, don't you worry about a thing. About your daughter, nope, she's not my type.
But suppose she says she loves me.
Are you afraid of the mix it black and white? Living in the land where the Lord say, mixing up race makes the blood impure.
Yeah.
She's a woman, I'm a man. Look at your face, I see, I can't stand it. Get down. Oh, no, come on, now.
People are afraid of. People are afraid of.
You're listening to Community and Technology here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem.
Dave, I know you have your rundown sheet there, but I want to get back to something a little more practical and on the ground for our listeners. We've been talking about this over-the-top television and all the things that you can do with the internet. Can we have a little discussion about some of the ways that they actually do that? If I have an internet connection, what can I do? Everybody knows about Netflix, but what else is available? How can I? Is there other TV services and movie services that are available?
Absolutely.
Like what? I know I've heard about Roku. Does anybody hear about Roku?
Is so in my apartment. I live with a techie who had. So I've tried both Roku, the Chromecast, and the Apple TV.
And all of those are what?
All of those are kind of just like a VCR, but instead of plugging in VCRs, you kind of plug in internet providers of video.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're channels.
These are little boxes, some of them like an inch square at this point, that let you connect to the internet on your TV.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way that you watch Hulu or Netflix or any of several hundred other services that are out there. Some free, some not.
So how would you compare them? And you've had several in your apartment. How would you compare them?
The Chromecast is one of the cheaper options, and it's clunky. It's actively clunky. The Google TV, I'm sorry, the Apple.
That's about $35 for the device.
Oh yeah,
by the way, the Chromecast.
But it's also probably being phased out. Google doesn't actually know what it itself is doing. You can get different kind of set-top boxes of different varieties from Google. There's Android TV, there's Google TV, and there's Chromecast. Chromecast is best for if you want to kind of project from your laptop to your TV. It doesn't really run on its own. The Roku has its own remote, and it runs on its own. That's what my parents have used to cut their cord.
There's a big problem with the Roku, and we have a couple of these too. Roku will not work with a lot of the video formats that you might be getting movies in. It works great with Netflix and Amazon and Hulu. It works fine with the fascinating free talks from TED, T-E-D, which are the TED Talks are great because they give you speeches by somebody really interesting, and they only take 8 minutes.
Do they have their own menu of programming, Roku?
Absolutely.
They do. It's a channel.
So TED is a channel, Netflix is a channel, Amazon is a channel, and there's literally hundreds of others.
Have you heard about the secret channels? I just found out that there are secret channels on Roku where you can get like the developer pin and you have to log in through your Roku website account, and it's different than the one you get through the remote.
By the way, Roku retails for about $100.
Nope.
It's
no,
a range.
It's cheaper
They've
now?
got cheapers down to $39 and $49.
Wow, this is the Roku 3, the latest one?
No, that's the one that's most expensive.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it is really easy to get the free stuff from Hulu, the free stuff from ABC, the free stuff from NBC, the free stuff from TED, the free stuff from Stanford and MIT, from YouTube, and so on. The Roku box does all of that really well.
It's not good if you have local files. That's what you were talking about with movies. If you have different formats of your own that you want to play.
Well, on your PC, say you want to play.
Or if you have a networked storage device, a NAS, network attached storage.
In other words, if you download Mad Men from Sunday night, there's a good chance that on the Roku it won't play, unfortunately.
Unless you use something like Handbrake or ImPlayer or any of the other conversions.
There are loads of ways us geeks can solve that problem.
You just get
they also
nerdier
won't play
and
on the
nerdier.
iPhone. So to put it on your iPhone and your iPad,
we're trying to keep it simple for our audience so that they can get an understanding of what this over-the-top TV thing is, and maybe experiment with some of these low-cost devices, all of which are under $100, some as low as $35, that allows them to see all kind of video over the internet. All you need is your internet connection.
You can also just have a laptop that has an HDMI cord and plug it out from your laptop onto the screen. It depends on what your use case is.
Now, I have to put something on the record here. About 6 years ago, because I'm a reporter, Netflix gave me a free account
Wow.
So I still have a free Netflix account, which if I were paying for, would be less than $10 a month.
$8 a month. It's the best value in video, if you ask me today.
But I have to put on the record that, yes, I get a free Netflix account.
Okay. Full disclosure.
And
I'm not going to disclose that my roommate pays for the one in our place.
And I should disclose that I probably will be here, but I'll probably next month, but I will probably be here over Skype because I will be in Europe because a conference on G.Fast is paying my way to Paris.
What's G.Fast, Dave? What is that?
We now have a new kind of DSL that can take you to 200 and 500 megabits in an apartment building.
Wow.
There is no reason you shouldn't be getting 100 megabits in most places in the developed world now. The technology is all there, and it's not even that expensive.
But DSL is over copper. Is there any copper anymore in this country?
Yes.
Where?
I have friends in Ithaca.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No. There are 40 million people connected over DSL in this country.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there are still more than that connected over phones. And there are copper lines into most of the homes that have cable.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is the latest, the G.Fast, which if you want to hear about, come to Paris on the 17th for the G.Fast Summit, lets you put a box in the basement or somewhere around, like you used to do in the projects.
We did that 15 years ago, 10
but
years
instead,
ago.
you were getting up 50 and 100 megabits.
That's right.
We now can get 500 megabits up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to get higher. And cable is now starting to ship the gigabit cable.
Mm-hmm.
And fiber is being sold by Verizon, usually for 50 and 100 megabits. But the system that most people have can go to a gigabit if they wanted to. And everybody in 22,000 homes in Vermont, in the VTEL territory that I was up there working with, get a gigabit clean for the same price they had been getting DSL.
From the phone company?
From the local phone company.
The local, not Verizon, not AT&T, not Sprint.
And it's that cheap because when they had this multi-billion-dollar broadband stimulus, the local phone company up there said, we want some of the money.
Mm-hmm.
And a fairly smart guy in Washington who was running the program said, what are you going to do if we give you the money? And they said, we're going to give everybody a gigabit for $35 a month.
Wow.
It's one of the very few things in that program that was not totally wasted money.
God bless those 20,000 customers.
There's going to be
I'm
more
jealous.
and more. And I'd like it too. Okay, net neutrality is something we talked about last time.
Mm-hmm.
It got through the FCC. Nobody believed it. For years and years, we all felt like we were tilting at windmills to try to prevent the telcos to decide what we can watch on TV. So we brought that up in the previous show, and I had to explain what's net neutrality. So I put the picture up of Brian Roberts, the CEO of Comcast, and Randall Stevenson, the CEO of AT&T, and said net neutrality is making rules that these guys can't decide what you can watch on television.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it comes down to, and everything else is just trying to confuse people.
Well, now you bring up an interesting subject. The Comcast buyout of Time Warner just fell through last week or so. What impact, if any, do you think that's going to have on folks on the ground?
It turns out, well, we already know what impact it's going to have on folks on the ground.
Okay.
The fact that the deal fell through was because some smart people in Washington, including the chairman of the FCC, who used to be a cable lobbyist, so most of the people I know didn't trust him.
Yeah, including me.
Yeah.
I'm very surprised.
Perfectly sensible, saw that if you put Comcast and Time Warner together, that's more than half the cable in the U.S., and they'd have so much power they could do whatever they feel like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they blocked it. The FCC has come out with the rules saying you can't do that. You've got to let everything get through. And there's one of the things that happened is every major phone and cable company, directly or through their association, has sued the FCC to get rid of those rules.
You're talking about net neutrality now.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
net neutrality. But something that's only the industry knows, Verizon and one of the other big guys, it may have been Comcast, but I don't remember, decided it wasn't worth fighting. And they just made a deal with two of the biggest independents, Level 3 and Cogent, that they will connect, take everything, charge a very little bit for the connection, which is fair. It costs something for the connection, and let YouTube and Amazon and Netflix go through Cogent or Level 3 and not be blocked.
Wow.
Because Verizon and Comcast were blocking them 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it took off.
Interesting. Now, Cogent and who else did you mention?
Level 3
Level
are two
3, those
very
are
big wholesale networks
Okay.
that people like Netflix
With
are
a lot
using.
of fiber optics running all across the country and able to deliver traffic from someplace like Netflix headquarters into the end user or to the local company in your neighborhood that then passes it on to you. Is that how that works,
They can
Dave?
do a little bit better than that. They can pick it up in Turkey or in Singapore and deliver it to me here in New York. And it turns out that part of the internet is fairly competitive, and the costs are so low that it's reasonable, and you don't even need much. You don't need a regulation there today because it is competitive enough.
Now, you mentioned lawsuits. What do you think is going to happen? Is it possible that the net neutrality rules will get thrown out by some district court, a circuit court, or
The chairman of the FCC this week was asked that question, and he said, "We're going to win this one." He didn't say why he thinks he's going to win this one. For the last 15 years, if the FCC ever tried to do anything, they were shot down in court because the D.C. Circuit, which rules on all the FCC things, happened to have 6 hardline conservative libertarians on it who think government should not make rules about anything and shot down whatever they were doing for years.
Quick time out. If you think it's not important who gets elected and appointed judgeships, listen up.
Okay. Harry Edwards and the other folks we're talking about. Harry Edwards happened to be a black man and a Democrat, but he didn't like government getting involved. Reached retirement age. And Obama has put 3 new people on that court.
3.
Yep.
Wow.
3 out of, I think, 9. And it probably has turned around that court so that there's a very good chance that AT&T will not be able to destroy the FCC plans in court. But they intend to tie it up for the next 3 years.
When you say tie it up, can they enforce some sort of stay so that it won't go into effect?
They have applied for precisely those stays, and so far people have been saying no.
Okay.
Now, interesting end of this. We're talking here, we had 1 million people write to the FCC saying, we want neutrality. We don't want Randall Stevenson to run our TV set. Have either of you guys seen where that happened again?
No.
No. Tell
India.
us.
In India, they're having the same debate. Literally over 1 million people have sent emails to the regulator there saying, in particular, we don't want Facebook to have a big advantage over all the Indian companies that we want to connect to. And the fix had been in, and the regulator is now saying maybe we shouldn't let Facebook do this kind of thing.
So
and
Dave,
it's going to at the cabinet level in India now.
So, Dave, I know you're involved with the Internet Society, which is a body that looks at what's going on with the Internet worldwide. Is this type of struggle, the net neutrality struggle, happening on a global basis?
Net neutrality is happening on the global basis, but not at the Internet Society in its headquarters in the United States. For reasons that we aren't worth getting into now, but the Internet Society, headquartered in the United States, is very close to powers that be in the United States, so that the New York branch of the Internet Society may say something, the Indian branch may or may not say something, and the Australian branch stuck themselves out saying, we don't want to block the BBC and American television. But unfortunately, the Internet Society is one of is not doing this kind of thing.
So is there an international voice advocating for this type of openness?
To a little bit, the people who are in the middle of this,
Mm-hmm.
Free Press being a very good one,
Mhm.
New America Foundation being a very good one,
Mm-hmm.
in this country also do things internationally. For example, Harold Feld was in Dubai with me fighting these issues
Mhm.
2.5
Mhm.
years ago.
Now, some folks might wonder, why are we talking about this? Why is this of any interest to me? And from where I sit, it's a fascinating subject because we are in the midst of a technological revolution where the technology has been globalized, it has been decentralized, it has been gotten so inexpensive that everyday people have access to a global network at, I won't say zero cost, but near zero cost. So how the activity on this global network gets regulated and managed going forward is something that we all need to pay attention to.
Now, guess what drives the United States and all the global fora? The first thing is there's enormous power to the AT&Ts and the Verizons and the Ciscos. And I'm actually on the State Department committee, so I see it directly. The other thing is the United States has been screaming around the world, we want freedom. We don't want the internet to be challenged by the UN or by anybody else. Now, some people who are saying that are deep believers in freedom of speech.
Are what?
True believers in freedom of speech.
And others are protecting their
The
vested
most important,
interest.
in Dubai, the U.S. had 105 people in their delegation, and 14 of them were from what we call the three-letter agencies. NSA, DOD, CIA, and so on. And I assure you that those 14 did not fly to the other side of the world to protect freedom of speech. This is before the Snowden stuff came out, so we only knew most of it. Now what we know. But another picture that our technical problems mean we can't get on the stage is I pulled two headlines out of today's New York Times online. One of them is France passes new legislation for pervasive spying that went beyond anything that's legal in the United States. Of course, we
Not
do the
what
things
we're
so-
not doing, just that it isn't legal.
Since 9/11, everything they couldn't do before that, they can do. And a friend of mine who knew said that, and I didn't know what that meant till we saw the Snowden stuff. And Germany was cooperating with the NSA to spy on the European Union and the allies of both of our countries. One of the games being played is that there is a law that says the NSA cannot snoop on Americans in most cases. So they have a very simple solution. They asked their friends in Britain to snoop on the Americans.
That's called a workaround.
Yeah. It came up. There was one of the Snowden things said they were intercepting 30 million phone calls a day in France. And the NSA made sure to let the world know that they were doing nothing of the sort. The NSA had access to 30 million phone calls, but it was the French who were doing the intercepting.
Wow.
And, of course, when we look at this, it is true that China and Russia are far more authoritarian than any of us. And that's the other piece of what the U.S. has been fighting for. Larry Strickling, number 2 guy on the U.S. delegation, while we were fighting all these things out at the Whcr in Dubai. And it's a small world, this policy stuff, and so you get to know everybody. And I looked at Larry and said, literally the night before it all broke apart in the United States duct, why are we fighting on this? The things you're fighting on add up to a hill of beans that we don't care about. And Larry looked at me and said, Dave, do you really want China and Russia to take over the internet? So, lots of wonderful rhetoric about freedom. Lots of multi-million-dollar lobbying to explain why the interest of AT&T and Google are also the interest of Africa. But when you're inside and push comes to shove, the U.S. doesn't want China and India, China and India, but China and Russia in particular, to make internet rules, because we don't want China and Russia to make internet rules. The Cold War is not over. And in fact, this was the one, and then I got to let you guys talk to me, because I've been talking too much. I presumed, before I knew from Snowden that everything was being watched, I figured I was probably being watched. I haven't been that political, but I've been in a few places. But I was absolutely sure when I came back from Dubai in 2012 that I became a person of interest, that they watch me regularly. I had met in Dubai as a reporter. I go there and I talk to people and I try to find out what's going on. The number 2 guy in the Russian delegation. And I got home and he sent me a friend request, actually a LinkedIn connection request. And I said, sure. I learned from him. He looked just like my little old granddaddy, who was born in Smilvitz in 1902. Looked just like him. And I became sure at that point that they didn't know what I was talking to the Russians about, and they wanted to make sure that they did know. And that's how it went.
I think of all of surveillance in a very different way than you do, because I don't assume they're watching me. I assume they're watching everyone, and that they're going to pull the information the moment you start to be interesting, which is a different assumption about what the threat model looks like.
This is something that most of us didn't know until the Snowden stuff came out. You're absolutely right. It's very clear. They're just recording everything. They are only listening directly, or mostly listening with their computers, looking for keywords and other patterns, to a fraction of it. But they're ready to go. I am sure there was somebody who has pulled out every phone call, not just of that guy who started shooting in Texas, but the 50 people he had sent an email to in the last year. And everything they did is presumably being looked at now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Actually, it's probably much more than that. There's $40 billion going into the surveillance state. They happen to be very, very good at what they do. And they're watching so much that I didn't believe it as the Snowden stuff kept coming out. And I'm in the business. I know a lot of the people involved. We don't talk, we stay friends because we don't talk about things like that. But I had no idea just how much they were doing.
Mm-hmm. You know, we used to think it was paranoia, but it's not paranoia, is it? It's fact.
And most people in this country, I would suspect like 75%, if they only used it for actually going up against things like bombers, would think it the right thing to do. We may very well disagree, and most of my friends disagree. I come from the left. But most people think that if we can trust the government, maybe they should have this kind of power, which isn't absolute power, but is close enough to frighten people. And you should make up your decision yourself on whether or not you want to trust the U.S. government. We're almost done here. I think that see the guy coming in, so we only have a few minutes.
On my last show on Technicolor Radio, which is also technology and culture, we had Matt Mitchell on, and he runs an event called Harlem Crypto, and it's a series. There's this crypto party initiative where people learn how to encrypt, how to use different technologies, and we had him on Monday, and it was fantastic. But when people, it sometimes sounds so hopeless when you talk about the surveillance state, but I think as more people understand it, and as the tools for self-protection get easier and easier to use with things like Perio or Keybase IO, more people will actually start to encrypt, and that will become a norm, and it will just kind of shift the nature of the surveillance state, at least make it harder.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think the other thing that's happening is, in terms of the technology trend, is that folks are getting the tools so that we can look at and record and see what is happening as well. So that it's not just them watching us, but us watching us and them. And as We Are Watching Us becomes more and more pervasive, I think there's going to be a lot less funny business going on.
It is wonderful that there are cameras watching brutal policemen, and whatever you think, there certainly are some brutal policemen, and nearly everybody in society carries a camera all the time in their phone, and sometimes that makes a difference.
Yep.
Okay. What are we going to do a month from now on the first Wednesday of June?
More technology. Maybe someone will call in out there, 212-650-6903 before we leave the air and tell us what they'd like to hear us talk about. How about that?
Well, I want the Internet of Things.
Yes, that's something that we kind of had on the table. That's a fascinating topic to me.
And I keep sending over to people and say, I want to do the Internet of Things, saying, and just what do you want to say about it? So when we figure out just what we want to say, maybe next month, it'll be totally appropriate. I will, with a little bit of luck, be 5 time zones away at that point, but calling in.
Oh, lucky you, Dave.
I have hard duty. You know, I have no choice. It was they offered me a gig, and how could I say no?
You got to go. Our next show is next month, June 3rd, Wednesday, June 3rd, 5 to 6 p.m., Community and Technology. Please be sure and tune in. WHCR, the voice of Harlem.
2 minutes before the hour, it's time for us to start playing some cards and take a break so the next show can get into the studio. Thank you all.
Identity theft is one of the fastest growing crimes in the United States. Every year, 15 million residents in the United States have their identities stolen. Sometimes there is no way to prevent identity theft, but there are some precautions you can take. Number 1, never share personal information like your social security number with anyone. Number 2, pay attention to your surroundings and your belongings. Number 3, only keep essentials in your wallet or purse. Number 4, monitor your bank and credit card accounts weekly, if not daily. Number 5, get copies of your credit report at least twice a year. Number 6, shred all documents that have your address and account numbers on them. If your identity has been stolen, there are immediate steps you can take to repair the damage. Go to www.consumer.ftc.gov and type in identity theft for instructions.
Texting while driving is dangerous. The driver who is texting is distracted, putting himself, pedestrians, and other drivers at risk. Statistics show that 25% of all car accidents, or 1 million car crashes a year, involve a distracted driver. In 2012, 3,500 people were killed and 400,000 were injured due to distracted drivers. It never makes sense to read and text while driving, so if it's an emergency that you have to make a phone call, in some cars, you can pair the car's Bluetooth with your cell phone and keep your hands free. So please, for the safety of you and everyone around you, keep your eyes on the road and not on your phone.
It's WHCR, the boys all home.
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
Hey, there he is. How's it going?
I'm having a stroke.
Are you going to shake my hand or what?
I'm having a stroke.
Wow, you're not even moving your arm.
I'm having a stroke.
Are you okay?
I'm having a stroke.
Your face looks weird, too.
I'm having a stroke.
Are you having a seizure or something?
I'm having a stroke.
When someone is having a stroke, they may not be able to say it with words, but their body language will tell you loud and clear.
I'm having a stroke.
You just need to know the sudden signs. Look for FAST, F-A-S-T. F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. Or S, speech difficulty. Then T, time. Time to call 911 immediately, because the sooner they get to the hospital, the sooner they'll get treatment. And that can make a remarkable difference in their recovery. Know the sudden signs. Face, arm, speech, time. Spot a stroke fast. Visit strokeassociation.org. Brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
This is a guided meditation on parenting. Begin by finding a comfortable, relaxed position. Let out whatever stress is in your body. It could be from the time you left your daughter's blouse in the dryer too long and it shrunk 4 sizes, or when you donated her private diary to the public library. or when you thought chaperoning the school dance meant actually dancing in the school dance. Whatever it is, let it go. The fire you started with that experimental dinner, let it go. The time you drove away from the gas pump, with the gas pump, let it go. 3, very relaxed. 2, there you go. 1.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you. For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Harlem has its own radio station, WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem.
Nutmeg Jazz in the middle.
Low when you speak love, a summer day withers away. Too soon, speak low when you speak love. Our moment is swift like ships adrift, we're swept apart too soon. Speak low, darling, speak low. Love is a spark lost in the dark. Too soon, I feel wherever I go that tomorrow is near, tomorrow is here, and always too soon. Time is so old and love so brief. Love is pure gold and time a thief. We're late, darling, we're late. The curtain descends, everything ends too soon, too soon. I wait, darling, I wait. Will you speak low to me, speak love to me, and so our summer day withers away. Too soon, sweet low, when you speak love.